And now, marine weather around Alaska.
It's time for your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook. Hi, I'm Peter Chan with the National Weather Service, and this is the Marine Weather Outlook for Sunday and Monday. Starting on this Saturday afternoon, we take a look at the sea ice, and it has advanced southward as expected with that northerly component to the wind here across the eastern portion of the Bering Sea. And we expect as winds become more easterly, this advancement will stop. We find, though, that for the most part, ice is really melted off and cleared out of most of Bristol Bay, and certainly as we go up through Cook Inlet, just a few remaining pieces there in the far north shallow end. Looking at the weather pattern we have in store, the big weather story this past week and weekend has been the strong ridge of high pressure over northwest Canada. This is a mid and upper level feature that has a reflection at the surface. It's allowed for sunshine, very warm afternoon temperatures in the Panhandle up into east central areas. A number of locations have seen high temperatures the past few days above 60 degrees. And that will begin to wane. This high won't be quite as dominant as it was here of the past several days. There is a cold front working its way through the eastern Arctic coast, eastern North Slope and Brooks Range as we go through later tonight and early Sunday morning. And then a collection of weak lows from around Haida Gwaii back toward the western Gulf. And then a more notable low will get organized here over the western Aleutians Sunday into Monday. So by Sunday afternoon, we expect just this trough that's all that's left of that moisture feed that brought the heavy rainfall to Kodiak Island. That has going to continue to break down Sunday into Monday. A little bit of moisture could trigger a few light showers creeping up into the Panhandle as we go through Sunday into Monday. The front off to the north presses east-southeastward and will weaken, but this will be the strongest weather system on the map. We look for a low to bottom out down around 970 millibars on Monday afternoon. That'll be sitting out over the western Aleutians, lower Bering with this occluded front wrapped around it that'll have gale force winds and perhaps a few low-end storm force gusts associated with the frontal system pushing on through, and then the wraparound coming in on the backside of the low. Another low will be down in the North Pacific trying to lift northward toward the Gulf, but otherwise, at least early in the week, that'll be the most notable system. As a result, we do expect in the Panhandle on Sunday, north winds Lynn Canal 10 knots, but southeast to south winds 10 knots. Ketchikan up through Petersburg with waves only running a couple of feet. Outer shore winds along the Gulf will be generally southwest at 10 to 15 knots, swells right around 4 or 5 feet. On Monday, look for northerly winds continuing there in Lynn Canal, 10 knots with waves running a couple of feet, but southeast winds to 10 knots, Stevens Passage down through Dixon Entrance. And for the outer coast, at least south of Gustavus, the Icy Strait Corridor, we expect southeast winds 15 knots, becoming more easterly outside of Yakutat Bay and Cape Suckling with swells again right around 5 feet. Winds will have come down too across areas of the Gulf. We anticipate variable winds just around 10 knots within Prince William Sound, waves a foot or two. Look for easterly winds there at the entrance of Cook Inlet and lower Cook Inlet outside of Homer at 15 knots with swells just around 3 to maybe 5 feet outside of there in the Gulf. North end of the inlet, we're looking at variable winds 10 knots on Monday, northeast winds to 10 knots within the wider expanse of Prince William Sound, and then easterly winds here, lower Cook Inlet and the entrance there at 15 knots with swells of 3 to 4 feet. Also across Kodiak Island back through the Alaska Peninsula, winds will be considerably lighter than they have been. Variable winds around 10 knots, Shelikof Strait to east of Chiknik. And then westerly winds there in areas south of Bristol Bay and at 15 knots, but becoming variable again north of Cold Bay. So waves not really all that impressive. Winds will try to come around, though, toward the east and southwest on Monday in advance of the frontal system that's going to be way out toward the central Aleutians. So look for east winds, Shelikof Strait, 15 knots, and then generally east-southeast winds 20 becoming 25 to 30 knots as you get north of Cold Bay and south of False Pass. Waves may get up around 4 to 6 feet there as you get into that better wind field approaching the eastern Aleutians. Sunday afternoon, though, eastern Aleutians around Dutch Harbor, southerly 15 knots, but they will be bumping upward 30 to even 35 knots here through the central Aleutians out of the south-southeast. And then by Monday, we have that deeper low, the low center pressure down around or just above 970 millibars. So a broad area first out ahead of this front. Southeast winds 35 to 40 knots, and then behind the front winds shift more southwesterly, 25 knots there between Atka and Adak, but pick up again from Kiska off to the west and south. We're looking at southwest to westerly gales to 45 knots. And out along the southwest coast, out of Norton Sound, 15-knot winds out of the northeast. Northeast to north winds around 10 knots along the lower Yukon Delta. Look for northwest winds there within Kuskokwim and Bristol Bay, 10 to 15 knots. But southerly winds in the Pribilofs to 15 knots with 2-foot waves. As I said, I don't expect the ice to be advancing much early next week as the wind flow is going to be going more toward the east. And with that frontal system approaching St. Paul, St. George, and St. Matthew, we expect southeast to easterly gales to 40 knots and waves 12 to 14 feet. Easterly winds out of Norton Sound at about 10 knots. Along through the Bering Strait, there will be some stronger winds Sunday. This is going to lead to blowing snow, especially through the Bering Strait on the northwest side of the Seward Peninsula and north side of St. Lawrence Island, as high as 50 knots, vicinity of Wales down to Port Clarence. As we go up the Chukchi Sea, winds fall off out of the north at 25 knots. And then with the passage of that cold front working eastward, we expect westerly winds along the Arctic coast at about 20 knots from Utqiagvik to Kaktovik. For Monday, westerly winds continue Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik at 10 to 15 knots. They'll go northeasterly. Utqiagvik down through the lower Chukchi Sea at 15 to 20 knots. And then as we pass through the Bering Strait, look for north to northeast winds as high as 25 knots along the western coastline of the Seward Peninsula, as well as on the north side of St. Lawrence Island in the vicinity of Gambell and Savunga.